Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mudahar, and I think the future of the internet is something that I'm a little bit worried about. Now, in amongst everything that's been going on for the last couple months, World War III possibly happening, aliens. Something that's been happening for about a year now that I've been kind of watching is the internet and big government slowly accepting the idea of actually having ID checks to access quote unquote adult websites on the internet. So I'm going to go through a couple laws real quick that kind of blow me away. So this is one law from the state of California, the Parents Accountability and Child Protection Act, right? Now, if you look at this act real carefully, all right, one of the things inside it is a person or business that conducts business in California and that seeks to sell any product or service in or into California that is illegal under state law to sell to a minor, as described in subdivisions B and C. So if you go to subdivisions B and C, this includes, aerosol containers of paint that is capable of defacing property, so kids aren't, playing around with graffiti and whatnot. Body branding, dietary supplements, dangerous fireworks, firearms, BB devices, ammunition, electronic gadgets, or things like cigarettes, a less lethal weapon. Yes, it gets crazy. But see, subsection D is one that I wanted to hit. Basically, what they've said is products that are illegal to make available to minors, including adult websites. So obviously they mean websites where the owner of the internet websites for commercial gain knowingly publishes explicit content that on an annual basis exceeds 1/3 of the content published on the internet website. So again, B, which is explicit content, means visual depiction of adult, sexual stuff. So obviously this is not super duper crazy, but to go over what they want implemented, let me just read this part to you. Requiring the purchaser or participant to input, scan, or provide or display a government-issued identification, provided that the person or business complies with all laws governing the retention, use, and disclosure of personally identifiable information. So the moment you hear that, you can immediately tell that there is a requirement that some states want you to provide your actual driver's license to access adult sites on the internet, right? Now, yes, this is to prevent children from accessing, but like I've seen in history and I've reported many times, anytime you come across a law where children are supposed to be protected, it's usually a kind of Trojan horse to take away privacy, take away people's freedom, which is what I want to describe here, right? So I'm going to read a couple other laws real quickly to kind of like discuss this going forward. One of these laws comes directly from my own government in Canada, known as Bill S-210. So it's not just a California thing. This is something that could potentially affect the entirety of Canada. So here inside, they actually talk about Bill S-210 as a bill that a significant proportion of sexually explicit material accessed online is made available on the internet for commercial purposes, in particular through adult websites, and is not protected by an effective age verification method. Now, I've talked about age verification in the past, and honestly, there really isn't a proper effective method out there other than making sure a parent actually controls what kind of information is accessed in their household, which through actual parental control applications and settings, any parent can prevent their child from reasonably accessing adult content. Or you can just be a parent and talk to your child about this kind of stuff first. It doesn't have to be weird. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, what they kind of talked about is this act is to protect public health and public safety. So they want to protect the mental health of young persons by restricting access to cool material, protect Canadians from the harmful effects of, explicit material, which I get, deter organizations that make material available on the internet for commercial purposes from allowing young people to access that material. So inside the Canadian law over here, they talk about age verification methods where, again, they have to be reliable, maintain user privacy, and protect user personal information, collect and uses the information solely for age verification purposes, destroys any personal information collected for purposes once that verification is completed. So it sounds decently better than the Californian version, but again, to access an adult website and require an ID, it's kind of a slippery slope into censorship, which I'll discuss real quick. Now, the Canadian law is probably the best example out there. Another law out here that actually got introduced into Texas, known as HB number 1181, is about as dumb as one could get to. So for instance, this law is, again, it's built around protecting children, okay? So if you look at how they describe it, what they mention over here is, very quickly, if you read it, when they describe adult material, it includes anything that is the average person applying contemporary community standards would find, taking the material as a whole and with respect to minors, is designed to appeal to or pander to a prurient interest. So, in a manner patently offensive with respect to minors, exploits is devoted to or principally consists of depictions of actual simulated depictions of, seriously adult material. So inside over here, where it gets really wild is when you read section 129B002. So what they describe is a commercial entity that knowingly and intentionally publishes or distributes material on an internet website, including a social media platform, more than 1/3 of which is sexual material harmful to minors, so shall use reasonable age verification methods as described by section 129B003. So those reasonable verifications includes digital identification, so basically information stored on a digital network that may be accessed by a commercial entity that serves as proof of the identity of an individual. So a commercial entity that knowingly and intentionally publishes or distributes material on an internet website, or a third party that performs age verification under this chapter, shall require the individual to provide digital identification. So whether that be like their identification card, like a driver's license, a health card, just to prove who they are, comply with the following age verification systems that verifies using government-issued identification, a commercially reasonable method that relies on public and private transactional data to verify the age of the individual. Now, this is the thing about this kind of stuff that really wilds me out. And how does this lead to censorship? And, how does this lead to anything like that, Mutahar? What if this is just designed to protect children? Now, I definitely get it. Protecting kids is important. And there's tons of adult material on the internet that if somebody really young watches, can seriously kind of screw their perception of, sexuology and whatnot. If you're a parent and you care about your child, I think it's important that you sit down and discuss these topics with them, as a parent to a child, just so they can have a better understanding of the world. It's how my parents talked to me about this, and I feel like it worked pretty reasonably well, okay? Shunting your kids away from that conversation and keeping them away from the internet and repressing them is just a recipe for disaster. You just consistently bottle things up until, it eventually spills over, right? Now, because of laws like this, adult websites like Pornhub have basically outright revoked access to states like Texas, Florida, and I believe Utah in this instance. So there's a few states that are actually really passing these laws. Now, what's important about this stuff is when we're talking about censorship, one of the actual provisions in both California and both Texas, two diametrically politically opposed states, all came up with the entire way of saying that this includes social media websites that include annually, or in some cases it's not even specified annually, 1/3 of the content is adult material. So imagine, instead of just, websites that upload adult content, right? If you wanted to really stop explicit content, why is that number not closer to something like 80%, 90%? I would say 100% of content that is uploaded to porn websites is literally adult content, okay? Like, that's literally the name of the game. Very few times will you find a video on, like, the Hub where it's somebody wholesomely playing Minecraft in a Let's Play, okay? That's more of the meme, not the norm. The problem with the 1/3 law is that if you look at sites like Reddit, where people really get access to some proper news that they enjoy, people get access to information that might be blocked from certain websites or certain parts of the world, those websites could actually fall under this because they also allow adult content. So all of a sudden, Reddit might have to choose whether they get rid of NSFW stuff completely, just to remain operating in states where digital IDs are a thing, or restrict access outright, or just start requiring those IDs. And the thing is, with sites like Twitter, where like adult material is uploaded on a constant daily basis, they either have to follow the same steps or not. So when the stuff starts to bleed into social media services and specific websites, and when the laws can be this vague, it makes me really look at this as sort of a Trojan horse to pushing censorship and privacy busting techniques like ID verification. You know, for a lot of organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they do talk about why this stuff is terrible. And a lot of it is bad because age verification systems are not entirely perfect. They're not good and they never will be that great. So what they say is the age-gating systems that propose to analyze and copy our biometric data, our government IDs, or both, because sometimes it could be them scanning your face, your fingerprints, whatever, will be a huge privacy setback for Americans of all ages. Electronically uploading and copying IDs is far from the equivalent of an in-person card check. Because it isn't. Some people equate this to, hey, if you're going to a nightclub or you're going to a strip club, they check your ID at the door. That's true. That's just one person grabbing your ID, looking at it and verifying a certain date on it, and then handing it back to you. It doesn't mean that ID gets digitally scanned, sent to a server, and then you're kind of holding your dick wondering, has it been deleted? Is my information stored securely? With the amount of hacks that constantly happen, that information being up there and in the wild is something that you should consider if you ever are uploading your ID for the world to see. Imagine if some hacker or some group gets access to that information before it's destroyed from any from any idea, from any way, from any shape or form. That can be incredibly hazardous to your personal, information, your personally identifiable information. Like imagine if a whole trove of IDs was just grabbed because, a server, you just didn't happen to delete them in time, or people were just inside a, server downloading these things as they were coming out. When in the world of computer hacking, you have to be pretty understandable that sometimes these things can happen and people's information just gets stolen out of nowhere, right? Like it is something we've seen happen not just this year, but the last few years. And the world of computer hacking, the world of information getting stolen, it's only just growing, it's only just, getting more and more and more intense as time goes on. So to go back to this law in specific, when you're looking at cases like Ashcroft v. ACLU, this was decided back in 2004, by the way. So this is like before, the age of YouTube really even began, that Web 2.0 era. When they talked about, again, internet content being restricted, what they said was content-based prohibitions enforced by severe criminal penalties have the constant potential to be a repressive force in the lives and thoughts of a free people. To guard against the threat of the Constitution demands that content-based restrictions on speech be presumed invalid, and that the government bear the burden of showing their constitutionality. Now, obviously, times have changed, but the thing about it is, when 1/3 of the content being uploaded to social media websites could constitute, explicit material that can be harmful to a minor, what eventually pushes the government from going, hey, we're not just banning Pornhub, we could potentially be banning Reddit, we could be banning Twitter, we could be banning any social media platform that doesn't hardline cut 18 plus content. At some point, this is almost reminiscent, in my opinion, to other countries like China, where the government has an increasing control over the flow of information for the average person. So this is not something that I'm okay with, because if it's currently being debated in the freest country in the world, which is the United States of America, then the rest of the world really has to be on guard, okay? The internet is the last bastion of true freedom that we have. And honestly, reading some of these laws, I can't help but hit that conspiratorial side of my head and think maybe it's the fucking VPN companies kind of like whispering to the ears of some of these old politicians, telling them, yeah, you gotta protect the kids. You gotta implement this, this, and this, because a lot of these laws never mention circumventing them by using VPNs as a possible clause. So sometimes it's like, you look at these laws and you think maybe the VPN companies got into them, because circumventing these laws is as easy as going to whatever VPN provider you have. Let's say, for example, you live in like Texas, where Pornhub is soon to be, age restricted via real IDs. If you don't want to provide your real ID, you get a VPN service, you go and you connect through California, and then you can get in that way. So again, these laws are so easy to circumvent, and when you don't even have VPNs hit the same way, where like, hey, in order to register for a VPN in the United States, you need to provide your ID. It makes you kind of wonder if there's some crazy lobbying going on that is aimed to actually target the online privacy rights of the average person. Because then these VPN companies can pretty much go and say, hey, you want to keep yourself private and safe online? You might want to have a VPN enabled. And when we get to a point where using our actual ID cards to access certain websites is a fucking norm in the future, those VPN companies aren't terribly wrong then. Because yes, in order to protect your privacy, you may have to start putting VPN condoms on your computer just to access portions of the internet. Now look, at the end of the day, look, these laws are about protecting children. That's kind of how they're pushed into the legal system. But I think, like I've always said, protecting your children involves you being a parent first and foremost. And I get it. Sometimes it's hard. You don't have the time to be the most vigilant parent out there. You don't have the time to capture up on new, ages of technology and protect your children from online stuff. But I don't think the government being the fucking internet nanny is the route anyone needs to be taking. Look, online digital ID requirements for anything, not even just adult videos or adult websites, is already a pretty scary precedent. You might think that, hey, Muda, if you're purchasing an internet service from your internet service provider, couldn't they just relay the information to the government of what websites and where you're accessing? Yeah, they absolutely could under a subpoena, under, the legal government asking them to. But in that case, it doesn't even involve you uploading and sharing IDs that potentially could get hacked and downloaded and viewed by anybody out there, right? Any hacker that would be interested. It also doesn't include the fact that even if I'm using my internet service provider and I want to conceal myself, I still have options like VPN services, like Tor, like plenty of services that are privacy focused that prevent anybody in the middle from actually looking at what I want to do on a free and open internet. Look, the internet is the last bastion of true, actual freedom that we have. It's the last digital frontier where anybody in the world can interact with each other. And I don't like the precedents of plenty of these countries implementing ID check laws where accessing certain parts of the internet now requires me to not just use my credit card for like a dummy payment to make sure that I'm an adult human being, but actually provide my legal government ID and send it off to a server where maybe it might be downloaded or deleted at some point, I'm not sure, worries me. It actually makes me worry about some of these organizations that are handling your IDs because you never know where they're sharing this information around with. You never know which big tech company is just getting backdoor access into your craziest personal information just because you wanted to access a website that might have been a little too adult in norm. I am generally worried about the future of the internet, and I think this is something that most people, if you're worried about your privacy in general, I think you need to be taking this a little bit more seriously. So look, whether you're a Canadian, whether you're an American, whether you're somebody from like, the fucking Antarctic Republic, whether you're an alien, okay? Shit, I don't care who you are. If you find this happening in your country, then you got to do what you can to write to your MP, write to your, government official and tell them not to be doing this kind of shit. You need to tell people not to do this because this is the beginning of an era of the internet where everything is monitored, surveilled more than it ever has been. And it's finally another kick in the nuts for your online privacy and safety. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.